Hello there, everyone. I'm Anna. I have the absolute pleasure today of talking to the lead singer and songwriter of a band that has proven to be quite the combo breaker because they're the first non-soloists to represent Luxembourg in a decade. They're bringing the first rock songs encore 9 years ago, and they're the first winners from Minette, the best province, my province, since 11 years ago. I'm talking, of course, about Ville Blanche, is their delightful, outspoken, passionate singer, lead singer, and songwriter Aurélia. So, Aurélia, how are you doing? Oh my God, Anna, yeah, I'm great, thank you. How are you? I'm really happy. I'm so glad to see rock getting back representing us at TV because really it was a staple of Luxembourg, and then 10 years we went without it almost. Yeah, I don't know what happened. We had many songs that were rock or metal that got close to winning, like Slonoval, like that's, but they never quite made it. So I'm so happy and thrilled and surprised and just overcome with a thousand emotions about how we managed to be the ones that did that and also broke the near win streak without getting a win for Minette too. So these are things that have happened that I never could have predicted. It's only a couple months ago when our biggest gig was in front of maybe 200 people, and most nights we were performing in really small venues. Often they were packed in somewhat dangerous way according to the fire safety laws. But yeah, we were going around dive bars and dungeons and any venue we could really. And then all of a sudden we have this huge opportunity and somehow we managed to make the most of it, and now we're going to Toulouse, to France, to represent our country, and it feels like a fever dream, but in the best possible way. Now, it's quite interesting how you got the ticket to Kyla because Kyla 23 was one that was fraught with a lot of difficulties. I was not involved in the selection, but I'm so delighted that you were selected. Yeah, that's right. So basically, as far as I know, you'd already selected artists and songs, but they didn't have the chance to get to Kyla because of some copyright dispute or something like that. And so Spiegelux couldn't distribute songs outside of the Grand Duchy, so other record labels were called upon to nominate artists, and our record label, Whiskey Void, nominated us, and the rest is history. But honestly, I didn't think that we were gonna win the regional selection, let alone the national selection, Kyle. So just winning CLM, which is Minette's provincial final, was a huge deal for us. And I'm just so, and I speak for the other girls, we're so honored to have brought something that is deeply meaningful to us and for it to have had such a great reception and that we're having the honor of representing this country. It feels like a bolt from the blue because, we're relatively well known in Eschalzit, but nothing like having the level of fame that winning Kyla gives you, let alone this access to an international stage to spread our message on. So incredible, really. So I believe you've been making music for quite some time, and it's something that came quite naturally to you. I suppose that's right. Yeah. So when I was growing up, just like now, I had lots of things to talk about, and I found that ranting at people about politics, about society, about prejudices, about equity, these things, I found that that wasn't as effective as presenting this message with a beat, with music, with a show. And somehow that got people thinking a lot more than just talking. So the three of us made this band when we were still in school, and honestly, it was a vehicle for political expression. Our first passion wasn't the music, it was spreading a message. But we soon fell in love with the music world, touring, getting to meet fans, performing live, and it's a bit early to say that we make a living out of it because we're all just doing this part time for the moment. And we're in university. I'm studying law. But hopefully we can make this a full-time gig after this international exposure. So let's see. So there's an interesting inspiration behind the name of your band, which translates as White Hounds. An interesting name for a band that is all about diversity. Yeah, so basically we thought of the name White Hounds because we were reading about apartheid and about segregation, things like this. And the impulse to try to divide humanity and put people in little boxes, you belong here, we belong there. It's something that we just could not fathom because we come from a metropolis that is multicultural, Escherel Z, and there's people from pretty much every country in the world under the sun there. And we think that that is something that makes a culture richer and it makes a place so much more interesting and it makes a people so much more open-minded because of diversity of perspectives, experiences, and cultural backgrounds. We think adding diversity never dilutes, it always enriches. And we chose the name Ville Blanches, a kind of ironic name and also as a kind of warning about what can happen when you do go against diversity and you do go scapegoating people who stand out. You end up with places without any color whatsoever, these monochrome societies where people are just afraid of sticking out and try to hide who they are, and there's no room for other perspectives and other people. And, so we picked this name for that reason because all our music talks about society as we wish it could be and society as we fear it's becoming. And we fear many countries getting into situations where they're just stuck with white towns, these monochrome societies, no diversity, and where the clock keeps getting pushed back, and where after one scapegoat has been rooted out, they go on to another and another. So tell me, Chasse, boucs, Goat Hunt was inspired by a terrible tragedy of recent times, which was in Annecy, where there was a guy who was asylum seeker who started stabbing young children, right? Yes, so some time ago I was online, I got news of this horrible incident, absolutely horrible what happened with this guy who'd come from Syria and he just went into this park by the side of a lake, gorgeous place, and started stabbing people up, mostly very, very young children, babies in pushchairs. And your reaction to that is one of absolute horror and indignation and like wonderment in a bad way. You're like, how could anybody do such a barbaric thing? But what entered my mind was never, oh, it's because of where he comes from or what he believes in. It's a mentally disturbed individual. We have that everywhere. We have people who have no empathy, just want to attack people. And there was an outpouring of grief and of solidarity with the victims. But at the same time, there was a wave of horrendous statements and blanket statements and bigoted statements by people who took this as proof that, oh, well, you got to deport them all these refugees that are fleeing a war, that are clinging on by the tips of their fingernails to the idea of being able to have a normal life. All of them are potential scumbags and, they need to be deported en masse because they all have the propensity to stab some babies like this guy did. And you wouldn't believe the amount of horrendous comments that were made against all refugees, all Muslims, all Syrians, all migrants in general, just because of one bad apple. And that got me thinking about other situations where people seem to cling on to bad news and treat it as good news. People will, for example, hear about a massacre in Serbia where one guy got hold of a gun and killed a dozen people or so, and they're like, well, it proves that Europe doesn't have control of guns either. What they need is more guns rather than fewer. It reminds me of other situations where one single bad story is used to dehumanize an entire group. Like there was one prisoner who was a sexual offender who was claiming to be trans and was put into a women's prison, and there was this huge moral uproar about what are you doing putting a wolf amongst the chickens, so to speak. What are you doing putting this person amongst women who they're going to attack, And not just that, but this was taken as proof by transphobes that all trans women are inherently dangerous to women. and shouldn't be allowed the basic dignity of recognition of who they are and of being able to use the spaces that belong to them. So through my lifetime, I've seen so many different groups scapegoated. I've seen so many people turn to simplistic narratives because it's so much easier to say, all the things that are wrong in this country are because of this group or that group. And it's something that horrifies me, you know? Uh, I can't believe that in an age of mass information where everything's at our fingertips, still have abundant prejudices, people looking to punish entire groups of people just because of one person they don't like from that group. So I wrote Chasse, boucs about this incessant search for scapegoats, and I wrote it kind of in the first person, talking to somebody who seemingly is my peer, but obviously by the end of the song we know they are not. And I'm talking to them, trying to address what they're doing, and trying to bring to the light the strategies that they use to divide and conquer society, to push these phony culture wars for the benefit of political elites. There's a lot of things going on in this song, and I'm just glad that it got a good audience that appreciated what we were trying to do with it. Your song talks a lot about the complicitness of the press in witch hunts against people too, right? Yes, that's right. So we honestly think that the media have an oversized role, sadly, in this outspilling of hatred towards already marginalized, already dehumanized groups. They don't seem to care that their words directly lead to violent action, and they seem to refuse responsibility on that front too. But our song is also directly invoking media, the newspapers, television channels, and media moguls. And we're saying, well, blood is on your hands because you're pushing out this narrative that demonizes entire groups. And then when somebody gets attacked, for example, in the UK, there were horrendous things being said against people who wanted to stay in, and they were saying, wow, these people are going to bring 80 million Turks to the UK because of them. We're going to get quote unquote swarmed by migrants. And an MP who was in favor of staying in the EU got shot in the head and died. And everybody was like, well, it's not our fault. What a terrible tragedy. It's got nothing to do with the fact that we've been calling people like her traitors of the nation. So our song is one that confronts the media and says, your headlines are related to the bloodshed. The bloodshed of today are the headlines of tomorrow, and the headlines of tomorrow often inspire the bloodshed of aftermorrow, So we're not just confronting individuals, we're confronting important organizations that should be a lot more careful and aware of what they're doing to demonize already marginalized groups. Now, this is something that hits quite close to home for your band because you're all queer, some of you are trans, and two of the three of you are from migrant backgrounds too, right? Yes, it's something that really hits home for us, and it's not just because it impacts us, it impacts our circle of friends coming from a place like Escher. We have many friends who came as asylum seekers, many friends who are Muslims, many friends who are people of color, many friends who are queer, and it's scary because we're seeing tactics that were used 20 or 30 years ago. For example, against trans people, this idea that, trans people are grooming the younger generation, convincing them that they're trans. And these are the same exact things that were used against gay people 30 years ago. So we say, yeah, we're flogging a dead horse, sensationalizing another death to push today's agenda of hate, which is just an update of yesterday. And what's truly distressing are the people who don't realize that they might be safe today, but they will be ostracized tomorrow. In the song we start off addressing the bigots in first person terms. It's like us versus them. And it's very ironic because the lyrics obviously make it clear that we totally oppose their bigoted words. By the end of the song, we're addressing them in the second person, and there's this you versus us, because already we've been ostracized. And with this song, we're trying to say, look out. anybody who is any way different. You might think, for example, what happens with some gay people. They're like, well, we better split off from trans people because we've earned some degree of respectability in society and these people are ruining it for us. But literally, the same strategies that were used to demonize gay men and women are being used to demonize trans people. And it's the same with Muslims. The same things that are said about, oh, Muslims are all potential terrorists, they all support jihad. It's just an echo of what was said in the 80s and 90s about Irish people, that they're all violent, they're all support the IRA. So tragic this day and age. People still fall for blanket statements that make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people out to be subhuman. And it's depressing that we're seeing things being peddled that even kind of invoke, Nazi Germany and things like that. And people are denying that, for example, saying, well, we want to get rid of all Muslims from Europe, or, there's no such thing as trans children and trans people should not be visible. They are unwilling to see that these are genocidal expressions of intent. And it's so scary to think that we're falling down that same hole. In this year, in this context, in a modern society with all the information in the world at our fingertips, how can it be that hostility and prejudice and bigotry is still running rampant, and with the media fanning them? So with this performance, we want to question all that, and we want to make people aware of these false narratives and make them aware that you might think that it doesn't impact you, but maybe today it doesn't, tomorrow it could. Well, Aurelia, it is such a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm so proud to see an act from Miss going to Eurovision again. I'll be cheering you so much for bringing this important message, and I really hope everything goes well in Toulouse. Thank you so much, Anna, and a pleasure to meet you too. Thank you so much.